Okay, that means it's 6:30, so we'll start the class by welcoming everybody. I don't know if there's any people here for the first time. If this is a first time for you, you're very welcome. The format of the evening is known to all regulars. We will have an evening puja, which is a short chant. It won't even be a full puja, actually. It'll just be the dedication of offerings and the preliminary homage. And then we will take the 3 refuges and 5 precepts. Although this is done in sort of ritualized, symbolic form, it basically is a reaffirmation of our commitment to live by a certain set of values, which are respectful, kind, and truthful to ourselves and to others, and basically help those applying those and living by those sort of virtuous standards helps tidy up our lives, which can get a bit complicated in the challenges of life that we often experience. And actually having a clean conscience, doing the right thing at the right time, even though we don't necessarily get what we want by doing so, we actually end up having a purer heart and feel more comfortable and can sleep easily, not being woken up by dreams and by fear of being caught out or in some way compromised. Taking the refuges, of course, is basically, again, just a reminder of the sort of 3 key refuges that we take formally as Buddhists or informally as just committed to our search for truth, which is essentially having trust in the possibility, the potential that we have to wake up, to be enlightened. Enlightened meaning being fully cognizant of and accepting the way things are, which is essentially wisdom. And with that wisdom also comes profound and deep understanding and compassion, not only for our own search and struggles for truth, but that of all others. So there is an instant sort of connection with all of existence in all its forms and manifestations. And one could say that actually that the metta or the karuna, the compassion that we feel for others is a reflection also of our enlightened understanding that we're all connected. We're all not only in the same boat, but actually manifesting in one ultimate reality, which is our awareness, which we have in common with all sentient and aware beings. So we will do the bit of chanting, which is in Pali and in English, Pali being the original language that Buddha used or was used in the Buddhist times to communicate, and in English to translate it. It may sound a bit difficult to a secular-minded person having sort of devotional chants, so they really are quite optional. You don't have to chant, you don't have to bow, but actually it's an interesting practice to develop as an experiment. So you can experiment and see what happens with practice. After that, we'll have some quiet time together, just sitting, and I'll offer a few words every now and then, just to help sort of tune our attention in, as it were, on the right wavelength to get as much benefit as we can from just sitting quietly, and use it as an opportunity to observe and witness what it feels like to be alive without getting caught up in the phenomena that we experience. It's a wonderful practice to be able to sit in silence quietly, and gives wonderful benefits which inform and can transform not only our life but our understanding of life. And then I might offer a few reflections, probably will, and then we'll leave some time towards the end in which I'm very welcome, very encouraged to ask questions, perhaps make some observations which we can share with ourselves, and then we'll finish the evening around 8 o'clock, hopefully pretty punctually. So that's the format of the evening, and hopefully it'll be something that you not only enjoy but benefit from. So I will turn to the shrine and I'll light my candle here on the shrine, and we'll start with the dedication of offerings on page 2. If you have a book, and Wendy, who very kindly is hosting us at the Buddhist Society, will put a screen share up so you can actually chant in your area without disturbing anybody, and yet hearing the chanting which will take place here in this shrine. Yoso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho. To the Blessed One, the Lord, who fully attained perfect enlightenment. Swakato yena Bhagavata Dhammo. To the teaching which he expounded so well. Supatipanno yasa bhagavato sāvaka sangho, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Tamayam bhagavantam sadhammam sasangham, to these the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Ime sakare yataraham aropite abhipujayama. We render with offerings our rightful homage. Sadhu no bhante bhagava suchira parini bhutopi. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having attained liberation, Pachima Janata Pamanasa, still had compassion for later generations. Ime sakare dugata panna karabhute patiganhatu. May these simple offerings be accepted. Amha kamdi garatam hitaya sukhaya, for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava, the Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed One. Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi. I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, the teaching so completely explained by him. Dhammam Namasami, I bow to the Dhamma. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho, the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sangham Namami, I bow to the Sangha. Andamayam Buddhasa Bhagavato Pubhavagalamakaram Karamaste. Now let us pay preliminary homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed, Noble, and Perfectly Enlightened One. Homage to the Blessed, Noble, and Perfectly Enlightened One. Homage to the Blessed, Noble, and Perfectly Enlightened One. We now go to page 128. It's taking the 3 refuges and determining the 5 precepts. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami. To the Buddha I go for refuge. To the Dhamma I go for refuge. To the Sangha I go for refuge. Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. The second time to the Buddha I go for refuge. For the second time to the Dhamma I go for refuge. For the second time to the Sangha I go for refuge. Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. For the third time to the Buddha I go for refuge. For the third time to the Dhamma I go for refuge. For the third time to the Sangha I go for refuge. Then we go down to the 5 precepts. Anatipata verimani sikhapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana verimani sikhapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu vichachara verimani sikhapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musawada verimani sikhapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Surameraya majja pamadatana verimani sikhapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani pancha sikhapadani silena sugatim yanti, silena bhogasampada, silena nibutim yanti, tasmat siddham visodaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is a source of happiness. Virtue is a source of true wealth. Virtue is a source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we bow 3 times. So we'll have a bit of space and a bit of time to allow the system to slow down a little bit and let whatever cares, worries, anxieties, concerns that might have been preoccupying us during the day to gradually sort of settle and lose their prominence in our consciousness, in our awareness. And it's really helpful to remember that just slowing down, just letting things settle in their own time, in their own accord, not trying to force things is really very, very helpful. This isn't another doing activity. It's a letting be activity, just letting things be. And just by being aware of what's happening, we stay to the awareness of what's happening without getting too caught up in the contents of what is happening and what is arising. So finding a comfortable position, sitting upright is very helpful. Shoulders and chest open but not forced. Head balanced on the spine in such a way that it doesn't put any stress on the neck muscles or shoulder muscles. And just being very, very aware of the lower part of one's body, legs, feet, and firmly seated, comfortably seated, so that we have a sort of nice low center of gravity. Connecting link between the solidity of the earth and the ground, sitting stable, and also being upright and having our head suspended by an imaginary golden thread all the way through to the sky and to heaven. And we just allow things to settle, just adjusting our posture as we need to. It's just moving a little bit just to find that sweet spot, a balance between attention and relaxation. And then very often we find that in doing so, the body, knowing that it's at rest, not sleepy rest, but just attentive rest, might quite naturally take in a slightly deeper in-breath and just a relaxing exhalation. So we can do that 2 or 3 times, even consciously, just breathing in, pausing for a second, and then allowing the air to be released. And a slight pause at the end of the out-breath, doing that 2 or 3 times in our own time. And just noticing the points of tension that we might have left over from the day. And just letting our awareness of those points of tension to help dissolve the tension, whether it be around the eyes, or the temples, or the mouth. Perhaps around the jaw. Noticing any tension in the throat area or the heart area or the solar plexus. You just notice and breathe. Breathe in and breathe out, allowing the natural cycle of breathing. It's both a marker, an indicator. And just by allowing ourselves to pause at the end of the out-breath every now and then, it just slows down all the activation that's been generated during the day. This is a private practice, insofar it's about focusing on bringing our attention to our inner experience. And it's relaxing because we don't have to be anybody. We don't have to do anything, we don't have to go anywhere. We can just be in a state of being, just simply being aware of our body posture, the sensations that arise in the body, be they pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. We can notice our mind state. And we just sit still and let the dust of the day settle. Breathing in life and energy, and breathing out the accumulated bits and pieces of the day's thoughts and activities. To help us experience a sense of regeneration. Allowing the power of the silence power of the stillness to permeate this moment. Just being still, being quiet. Just savoring the taste of silence. Just accepting this moment as it is. Pleasant, unpleasant, comfortable, uncomfortable. Just sitting, breathing. Letting the breath come and go. If the mind is tired or sleepy, or the mind keeps getting caught up in some train of thought, you just open the eyes gently and just connect with the physicality of the moment. Right now, it's just like this. And just be with it as it is. If the mind does wander off somewhere, that's all right, it's understandable. Nothing to get upset or angry or frustrated about. The moment we notice the mind has wandered off, we're online, we're with what is happening. So we find that we come back to being aware again and again and again and again. And that's fine, that's normal. We don't have to beat ourselves up or criticize ourselves. Breathing in, breathing out. Noticing the sensations of the body. Noticing the silence. Just being with what is. Sitting, being, breathing, witnessing, observing, So just being very aware of the transition from sitting with the eyes closed, attention directed inwards, slowly shifting to include the space we're in, the room, the walls, textures, colors. Noticing the letting go of the inner stillness if we had a nice quiet meditation, coming back into the world of form. Part of us perhaps still wanting to hold on to the quiet and the stillness and peace. Just experiencing the difference of being with a group of people and not having to talk, not having to say anything. The sort of normal social cues don't apply anymore. We can apply some of this, of course, to our everyday interactions as well. If we observe ourselves in conversation with others, we can so easily notice how we're already thinking what to say before the other person has finished speaking. And how easy it is to get lost in interactions, just preoccupied. With whatever topic is coming up. So this practice of awareness, which we're, as it were, cultivating in the conditions of a meditation workshop or class, actually offer very transferable skills to our everyday living. Having this ability to observe and, as it were, ride and not be driven by the reactions that we experience allows us to have a little bit of distance, put things into a slightly bigger context. The primary context being one of awareness, of course. So it's helpful to practice often some restraint in terms of what we say, what we speak, just to create that distance, not just into a space of greater awareness. It's not about being completely indifferent or not having any reactions. It's about not being overwhelmed or driven by them. So that we can, as it were, learn to develop and cultivate the state of more sustained inner calmness. inner peace. And it has a remarkable effect that can be a little bit strange to start off with. It can be perhaps disconcerting to the people that we know, or who know us, or think they know us. But it adds a dimension which is so easily missed. Because when we're a little bit calmer and more aware, we see more, we hear more, we recognize more of the phenomena that arises, the more subtle sort of currents of energy, of feeling. We can observe our reactions and our attitudes more clearly. And then, as it were, become less dictating. So the paradox is that in accepting how things are, the way we respond to the way things are actually changes the way things are. So even when being still and more witnessing, more observing, our calmness, the spaciousness that we sort of experience changes the quality of the interactions. And makes us more sensitive, more aware, which allows us to be kinder, more compassionate, and allows us to make better judgments, because life is a constant process of making judgment calls. It's a little bit like typing up an email, and the temptation might be to send it straight away. But with important emails or letters, it's always good to sleep on it and reread it the following day. What are we doing? Essentially, we're just creating a bit of space around an attitude, an opinion, a state of mind. And when we create a bit of space around it, it can be re-evaluated, reassessed. If you remember some time ago, we were looking at some of the sort of basic principles of what right speech entails. If we create a bit of space around a situation or an interaction, we can observe our reaction and observe it and assess it. Is it true? What am I feeling? Is this really what's happening? And then when we're prompted to react and say something, is this a helpful thing to say or do? So we put a question mark over things. It's not about not knowing at all. It's just about being open, about being spacious. And this can all happen quite quickly. Is this timely? Is this the right moment to say what one is feeling? We know what we're feeling. We might know what we have to or should be saying, but is this the right moment? How's this going to go down? And then a really important aspect of this reflective inner, sometimes quite quick summing up of a situation, but sometimes a bit of space is required. What tone is it coming over in? Is it kind? Is it actually motivated by an attitude of generosity, of kindness, a spirit of well-being? And then, of course, finding the right words in which to communicate it so that it's respectful and acknowledging the other person's position. Now, although it takes a while to put all this into words, as we get better in being tuned in to our feeling sensitive state, and exposing it to the discerning capacity of the mind to evaluate the situation or what has to be said. After a while, one just becomes more skillful in one's responses to the situations we find ourselves in. This is a potential ability that we all have. And it doesn't matter where we are on the developmental path, that these are the things that can be cultivated. And of course, this is the transformative aspect of what we refer to as our practice, which is living by a code of values, virtues, which we determine when we take the 5 precepts. And of course, the factors, the 8 factors of enlightenment, of the Eightfold Noble Path, which leads to enlightenment. It's recognizing our place in society, in the social network that we find ourselves in. It embodies right speech, right action, right livelihood, so that our external life reflects the values, our inner values that we try and live our life by. And then, of course, the key transformative elements of the Eightfold Noble Path is when we start engaging in right effort, really making an effort to avoid unskillful states of mind, unskillful speech, observations, attitudes, postures even. We communicate by our posture as well as with our words. And if we do experience and express an unwholesome state of mind or an action, we correct it as quickly as we can, acknowledging the shortcoming to ourselves and, of course, to anybody who's been affected by it. To try and be at peace with one's environment and one's immediate interactions. And of course, the counterpart to avoiding unskillful, unwholesome actions and words is to cultivate wholesome ones. So if we can't say anything wholesome, best to hold it, keep it, not express it, not communicate it. But if it's something which is positive, affirming, generous, kind, not to hide it under a bushel, as they say, but communicate it. It doesn't have to be incredibly attention drawing. It's more about an inner disposition, and then the rest will take over: the cultural context, your age, gender, the situation, the context we're in. You find the right way of expressing this affirming, positive, wholesome response. But then, of course, the key operating principle in this whole journey of transformation is mindfulness, being aware. Because if we're not aware of either what we're saying or the consequences of what we're saying or doing, then we're a bit like a bull in a china shop, just simply insensitive because of simply lack of awareness. So being aware really is a quite extraordinary, powerful tool for good, for bad, for change, for things being better. And then if one has the time, and it does take time, and helping generate the right conditions, to find time for deeper states of meditation. They don't come easily. They do come sometimes quite unprompted, unbidden, which is referred to as samadhi or deep states of absorption. We have the time, opportunity, the curiosity, the interest. It's really good to go and find conditions that actually are supportive of deeper meditative practice. There are some schools which pay an enormous amount of attention to those deeper states because they are literally enlightening. They don't necessarily equate to enlightenment, but what they do, they allow us to experience very refined states of consciousness, where our personality structures fall away, lose in their significance. And we just become absorbed in deeper and more refined states, increasingly refined states of consciousness. And they are very, very revealing, because they give us a completely different perspective and take on what we take for granted as ordinary, everyday life. There are people who take shortcuts with this, take psychedelic drugs to affect our state of consciousness. It's, I think, a mixed path. I personally wouldn't recommend it, but people do it. And it often does open a window of greater understanding. In fact, I know they're doing studies for all sorts of mental health conditions, including depression, which includes the use of psychedelics. But what is recognized, even in the research that they're doing, that it takes a lot of skill to manage someone through one of these episodes. And it's usually done in the presence of an experienced therapist, meditator, who helps guide the person through an altered states of consciousness. But those altered states of consciousness, of course, are registered. Where are they registered? In awareness. So we suddenly realize how pliable, how flexible our perception can be and how conditioned it is. But there is some of the benefits that come from deeper states of meditation, which we can experience on longer retreats, is that there's an element of discipline involved. In a sense, one could say that whatever one experiences on a retreat in terms of deeper states of consciousness and they bring about certain to help develop qualities of persistence, determination. There's a lot of integrity to that sort of practice. But even those states of meditation often benefit from the overview or oversight or support and understanding of a meditation teacher or master who has experienced those states, him or herself, and can advise and comment and support that sort of deeper practice. But it is part of the Eightfold Noble Path, so it mustn't be dismissed or diminished, devalued. Because as we sort of break down our normal take on reality, we see both the opportunity to change and often we just simply change as people. We just can't take our ordinary reality for granted as we saw it before. So it is, in a sense, literally eye-opening. But of course, the holy grail, if one wants to use that word, of all our practice is to come to a state of awakened enlightenment, realization, which goes even beyond the deeper states of meditation, because it includes those states of meditation. It knows the states of meditation, but knows that all these deeper states of meditation are also transient, just like everyday life experiences are transient. So the same principle that applies to all phenomena applies to deeper states of meditation as well. But the insight is into see the core principle, seeing the way things are and accepting the way things are. And it's only when we're in harmony and in line with the way things are that can we be truly in peace. Because the way things are is the way things are. The question is, are we aligned to the way things are? And the great sort of discovery, quote unquote, of the Buddha was to recognize that we suffer because we're not in line with the way things are. We're wanting things to be different. And that's what generates our suffering. So the paradox is that in accepting the way things are, including the suffering, in our acceptance, we actually find release. So the path of transformation includes suffering. It doesn't exclude it. It doesn't deny suffering. Quite the opposite, it accepts it. But that acceptance isn't just a mental, intellectual position that we take. It can be helped by it, but it's not it. It's on the level of experience. It's a felt experience. And this is where the integration of the emotional and the mental and the intellectual takes place. So those are the few thoughts and reflections that come to mind, which I share with you for your consideration. You don't have to agree with me, but hopefully it gives a few points that you may wish to comment on or think about. So we can just sit quietly for a bit. And if you do have a question or a point or an observation to make, hopefully Master Controller Wendy will give us the option of being able to unmute and share our thoughts together with the group. So do feel free to unmute if you wish to say something or contribute something, whether it be a reflection, a thought, or an observation. And if nobody says anything, that's fine as well. Yes, Will, hi.
Hi, Nick. Good evening and good evening, everyone. Thank you very much again for this evening. I just had a question on, well, maybe a bit of advice really on retreats. So I've probably been following this tradition for a couple of years now, and I've done a couple of weekend retreats and so on. And I really enjoy the sort of structured retreats and the ones that are, you know, organized. I think I suppose it's just what I'd really like to do, and sort of what my gut instinct is sort of just to go away on my own and just go somewhere for, I don't know, a number of days on my own. And I feel like, you know, for me, for example, discipline's not an issue, but I'm also conscious that I'm, you know, is there a bit of naivety there or a bit of, I don't know, overconfidence that I could just go away and do this? And you mentioned one thing there, for example, being sort of in close contact with someone more experienced, but it was just a bit of advice really, because that's what I feel like I just really would like to do. But I know that obviously structured retreats have evolved for a reason. So it was just your thoughts on that really, Nick.
Well, it's the things that comes to mind is that if you're inclined to experiment in that direction, I'd just do it. You know, if you commit to a weekend away somewhere on your own, or even a bit longer, you know, it's something that you're creating for yourself. So if you feel and recognize that you're actually out of your depth or getting overwhelmed, you can stop. I suppose in this modern age of technology, you could always agree to phone somebody if you want some advice and another take on it. But no, I think you should experiment. Solitary practice is very much part of the tradition. There are all sorts of analogies to or reflections on or statements made about solitary practice. To be like a lone tusker is the one that comes to mind. Well, we don't have tuskers in the UK, but in India, you know, the lone elephant was used as a symbol of a renunciant, of a mendicant monk, basically just foraging for food, going through the day on their own, because we gain a lot of not only support, but also our identity is often strengthened by the social interactions we're in. And essentially what we're doing in sort of this inquiry into who we are is putting question marks over it. And part of that involves solitary practice. What happens when we aren't surrounded by other people or interacting with other people? What happens to our sense of identity? Well, some people are more resilient and better able to handle it than others, but it does put one in a challenging situation. Sometimes people, even in social contexts, being alone is very alienating, very, very difficult for them to be. So we need both, actually, I feel. We need social interaction and we need solitary being, and each one of us has our own particular sort of mix of what's best for us. But there's no doubt about it that for those deeper states of meditation, a sort of focused, sustained attention really, really does, certainly in my experience and whatever I've read and heard, involve extended periods of solitariness, of being on one's own, even if it isn't a structured retreat. So I'd go for it, Will, and see what happens. And you can have my phone number if you want.
Thank you very much, Nick. And yeah, I might well take you up on that. I'll let you know how it goes. Thank you.
Yeah. The advantage of exploring meditation in a structured retreat is that a structured retreat is really a support system. It means we don't have to worry about food, don't have to worry about the sort of normal daily life preoccupations. It also, of course, cuts down the amount of external data that comes in. Don't have smartphones or devices to escape into. It's very interesting reading the statistics as to how many hours most people use their phones during the day. It's quite extraordinary, something like 4.5 hours. It's a phenomenal amount of time to be on a smartphone. And if I look at my time on devices, when I work on devices, my most primary means of communication is doing what we're doing right now. So being cut off from all of that, you suffer the pangs of frustrated desire. You notice how the mind goes for things. There's that same instinct that makes one switch on the phone or switch on the television or pick up a phone and just have a conversation. It's just to fill all the time, connect with something. It's ingesting experience, ingesting data of one form or another, which gives a sense of purpose and identity. And if there's a little bit of excitement in it, it makes it all the more attractive because we respond to excitement and to stimulation. What retreat settings do, of course, is take away the excitement, take away the stimulation, intentionally to take us down to a bare attention without it being distracted just by indulging in our likes and dislikes. So being in a structured environment can be very, very helpful for deeper meditation. So longer retreats are really a very powerful tool. But of course, everything that we gain in terms of what we learn on a longer retreat then has to somehow be integrated into daily life. And in fact, there are many analogies. The 10 ox herding pictures in the Japanese tradition are a good example of going off on one's own, working with one's inner demons and all the things that arise when we're exposed to just our unconscious material. And then there's that moment when there is the realization, the waking up process. And then there's the integration, the return to everyday life, to everyday situations. Because we tend to divide things into good and bad. We're always passing judgments. Well, actually, life includes everything, includes the mundane as well. And the mundane is part of the divine, to use that sort of language. And of course, this is all to be discovered in the one field, which the only reality that we have, the only thing that's real, which is our awareness. Everything else is transient without exception. And it's quite a journey of letting go, of disappointment, of disillusionment, to come to terms with that fact and actually realize that what is real actually is the only thing that's fulfilling, the only thing that's meaningful. And then when that's integrated into everyday life, it becomes tends to be much more balanced, much more harmonious, and much more rewarding and fulfilling. So the paradox is that we suffer the letting go, but actually enrich our lives and end up with a lot more. So we end up by having less, we end up with more. It's a great paradox of the spiritual life. By holding on to less, we end up with more. So even as we sit here in the silence, we can observe this this tone that comes in to our sense of being, the quality of just being present, the quality of presence. We're usually so caught up in the contents, in our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, running through scenarios of the past using our memory, speculating or looking forward to events or situations that might arise, looking forward to the pleasant ones, rather dreading and trying to avoid the unpleasant ones. And in getting caught up in the past and the future, we miss the simplicity, the bare simplicity of the present moment of presence. So our practice essentially is about cultivating presence, present moment awareness, if you want to give it a longer label, and just allowing ourselves to come to terms with the simplicity of present moment awareness. And it's something that can be cultivated. It's something we almost do naturally to some degree, but we get into bad habits. So you could say that our practice is essentially teaching us, conditioning us into better habits. Habits which leads to a greater appreciation and experience of peace, and kindly well-being. So as we sit in silence, we can observe what our mind does with the silence. We notice each one of us will have our individual experience of what the mind does as we sit in silence. We are so conditioned to focusing on objects that the mind is almost in a constant search for objects to focus attention on. But this process of searching for an object can be witnessed, can be observed, can be known. So what we're noticing actually is a craving for sensation, a craving for stimulation, a craving for some sort of data to be able to relate to. Because when we have data, we have a sense of identity in relationship to that data. So part of our practice, part of being on retreat or sitting in meditation, is to observe that craving but not act on it. And if we do act on it, to notice what happens when we do. It's not to pass judgment and criticize ourselves, but just, oh, so that's what happens, just noticing. In the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the 4 foundations of mindfulness, it starts with the body. So important to stay connected with the body. The body is physical, the body is here, the body is now. Although one can practice on mind states in terms of paying attention to mind states, we can pay attention to the contents of our mind, but it's much harder not to get lost in mind formations, mind fabrications, which is why it's always so good to come back to the sort of grounding, present moment reference point of the physical body and the sensations that arise in the body. And this applies to the most sublime and the most basic, the most mundane. So even one's going through some emotional dramas, and all of us go through emotional dramas at some point. It's a day or week or month, whether it be with people that we live with or work with, or the society we find ourselves in. We'll be triggered in one way or another sooner or later. We wouldn't be human if we didn't. So instead of trying to find a solution on a purely mental or emotional level, it's just to, in our practice, sit with the sensations that are generated on the level of the body. Sit with those. Every time the mind goes into the narrative, into the storyline, you can acknowledge that, well, that's the storyline, but come back to the emotions. Most of the tension points in terms of emotions in the body, where are they? Well, they're around the face, but the throat, often the upper chest, the heart region, the stomach. Those are usually the processing centers of emotions. And it's really sitting with that, breathing in, breathing out, and noticing how those sensations change as we sit with them. But we have to know how much time we spend there, because sometimes the emotions are very distressing. Physical pain and hurt of an emotional situation can be really quite overwhelming. So it's important also to have some positive, affirming resources at hand, whether it be going for a walk, listening to some nice music, having a conversation with a good friend. We need supportive, kind, positive, affirmative resources. And in fact, if we look at the Buddhist practice, the model that it presents is one of dealing with the pain, dealing with the suffering, accepting the suffering. But it also the practice of metta, of gratitude, of positive emotions, of kindness, generosity. to also emphasize as a counterbalance. Very famous, well-known historical Buddhist teacher who spoke about the terror and delight of deeper practice, because we expose ourselves to our fears and anxieties, but we can also expose ourselves to the joys and the beauty and the well-being that comes with the deeper practice. So it's a journey of inquiry, of exploration, which allows our experience of life to be transformed. And in the context of Buddhist practice, not as an end in itself, but to bring about a realization of deeper acceptance of life, which fulfills our human potential for enlightenment and realization. So, I look at my watch here and I see that it's coming up to 8 o'clock, which is the end of the class. I think it'd be nice to have a chant, just a brief one. My favorite chant, which I chant most days, is Reflections on Universal Wellbeing, which I think is on page 41. It might be nice to chant that and just sit quietly for a bit after having chanted it. Just let the words come in, because essentially we are encouraging and developing not only well-being for ourselves, but well-being for all those we love and care for, and even those that we don't. The world would be a much happier, calmer, nicer place if we practice the qualities that give rise to universal well-being. It's our contribution to world peace and the reduction in suffering. So, Wendy, page 41 and give the screen share. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now let us chant the reflections on universal well-being. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their own. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. So we'll go to the closing homage and then we can say goodbye to each other. I'll just ring the gong. I don't know if you hear it at all, because I know that Zoom tends to cut the gong out. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava, the Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, the teaching so completely explained by him. Dhammam Namasami, I bow to the Dhamma. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho, the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sangham Namami, I bow to the Sangha. I'd like to thank Wendy for hosting us in the background there at the Buddhist Society. Thank you very much. I forgot to thank you last week, Wendy, so this is a thank you for both last week and this week. Next week, Martin will be taking the class, and then we'll be alternating for a while between Martin and myself whilst the monastic community is on retreat. And I hope you've enjoyed and benefited from this evening. I wish you well. Hope you're all COVID-free, whether you're jabbed or not, and that you have a good week ahead. And thank you for joining, and look forward to seeing you again.
Can I express my gratitude for tonight's class? It was really, really wonderful, with very much to enjoy and to think over and to stay with us. I think it was truly wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you.